again, if you feel you can get that advantage straight away and get out, be central into the open water, there was also that almost method of everybody else starts to focus in on you, because we do get a couple of almost arrow points a lot of the time working their way out to those first turns. If you're in the center, you almost get everybody funneling towards you if you're out in front. It's a dangerous and bold play to make, but it can sometimes pay off.
It is, yeah, it does pay off, and I think a lot of it depends on your mentality. A lot of people, I'd say for most of the field, the swim is the most nervous part because it's out of your control. Even the best swimmers sometimes have a bad swim, end up getting a bit congested, a little bit kind of knocked around in the swim. So I'd say it is one of the most nerve-wracking parts of the race. So it takes a lot of guts, I think, just to choose the middle and know that that's probably the worst place and just go for it.
At least with 0.5 kilometre swim and 2 laps of this swim course, there is the opportunity to make amends if things do go slightly awry, so to speak, out there in the water. You can't win a triathlon, of course, on the swim, but you can certainly lose it if you end up being stuck too far back and maybe 2 minutes down or so coming out of the water. It's a lot to make up on the bike and on the run at the end.
Oh, it is, yeah. You have to be there in the swim or minimise the damage in the swim. I've seen many occasions where athletes have gone off the back and that's race over because that bike pack is never really getting back into it.
It's a course that we quite often see attempts at strong breakaways of a handful of athletes out there on the bike to try and find some separation. It's also considered a course here in South Korea where the run is oh so important. Even saw that last year, of course, with the fantastic effort from Gwen Jorgensen as she was getting herself back into the Olympic push and the Olympic frame of mind, coming here and winning with a stellar run right at the end of the women's race last year, albeit a sprint distance last year, the standard distance for the first time since 2022 here at Tongyeong. It's considered more of a sprint distance setting rather than standard distance, but it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out over the longer distance this morning. As all of the ladies are down there by the waterfront, and it's just that last anxious wait to get going and get out there and get on with things. Everything has been building up to this in the last few days. For some of these ladies, it's the chance to finish 2024 with a real bang, potentially a World Cup podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Very smooth out into the water, particularly on that left-hand side, and I think it's the Belgian straight away, Vermeylen, on that left side of your screen that's making the early headway.
Well, Vermeylen's an excellent swimmer. She's very strong over the 1500, but she's come from a swimming background. She can still swim a 27.50 for a 50-metre freestyle, so that's pretty fast. I mean, we're not talking Olympic level, but for triathlete level, that would beat the majority of the men's fields. You know, they say maybe that 80%, especially those who haven't come from a swimmer. So she's got that fast get-out speed, which is going to allow her to get a little bit of clear water and get into it. But like you said, there's going to be some women in this field that are aiming for a breakaway today, because it's not a very big field. That means there's bigger gaps, there's more space. A lot of the field are quite inexperienced, kind of some of those Korean athletes towards the back end of the field. So it means they've got a really good opportunity to maybe get some distance between those fast runners like Sandra Dode, who's won several World Cups, Gina Sereno, she's a strong swimmer, but probably not as strong as some of the other women. So, and one of the biggest threats for the win. So Jolien Vermeylen, this would be her sort of aim. She'd be looking to do that with someone like Sian Rainsley, Erica Ackland, Emma Jeffcoat, who's a bit further down there in position 12, who we can see there at the top of the screen.
I was going to say, you're basically giving us the narrative of the race as it's playing out right in front of us. Jeffcoat on the far side of the screen, leading that other arrow point of those on the right, if you're looking at them coming towards you. In the meantime, it's Vermeylen and Rainsley, the Brit and Belgian, who were leading the charge of the yellow caps, but it's a very strong, powerful start from the Australian Emma Jeffcoat over on that far side. She's been closely followed as well by Eva Goodison. So there is definitely a Southern Hemisphere feel to one side and a very European feel to the other as they make their way in the water out towards that first turn buoy up at the top of this swim course. And you just wonder, they're all going to start coming in from that far side in towards where Vermeylen and Rainsley are, and it could just get a little congested for them going around those turns. You can just see up there as well with the leaders. Alissa Konig is the French athlete in the red swim cap with the number 21 on it. She too is part of that leading 5 or so on that top end of your screen.
Yeah, Emma Jeffcoat's had an amazing start here. So she went to that other side of the pontoon. And yeah, brilliant start. She's really stringing it out. We see Vermeylen and Rainsley have joined in about 5th or 6th down the line. So we thought they had a good start, but Jeffcoat's got the edge there. I mean, she's a 3-time World Cup winner. She's, yeah, she's not even 30 yet. She's been to the Olympics. It has been a bit of a build up for her. She had to have an ankle reconstruction, so surgery, I think that was last year. So it really is been a slow return for her. She's not reached the heights of that World Cup winning level, but it's kind of amazing. But I think the dedication and commitment to keep going with all of those setbacks. She had a blood clot post-surgery as well, so it hasn't been an easy route for her to still be here and still doing the sport. And if you look at her kind of social media, she's so positive. She's just really kind of loves being out there racing, experiencing the world, traveling to all these different places. So it's good to see her back towards the front of the field.
And it's a 2024 campaign for Emma Jeffcoat that is coming towards its end, and you're starting to see a return to some of that form. 7th in the World Cup in Valencia back in September. A 17th is nothing to turn your nose up at in terms of her position in Rome as well, just a few weeks ago. Also 16th in Tizzy as well. Getting towards those top 10 finishes once more on World Cup events, and it would be a fine way to cap off her year if she can find herself in a podium position, or at least competing for a podium position here in Tongyeong today, as they do make their first turn now around the first buoy. It all looks fairly smooth with the leaders out in front. We've got a fair bit of a train taking place out there, just away from the rest of the pack that suddenly now starts to get congested around that first buoy at the top end.
Yeah, this would be Emma Jeffcoat's plan, is to really push the pace, string it out, and take away a small group from that main pack, which is what she's doing perfectly at the moment. You can see, just looking a little bit further back, a few little gaps opening up down that line. And the more she applies the pressure over this lap and into the second lap, where some of the weaker swimmers are getting tired, she's really going to try and form that front pack.
I think I saw Summer Rappaport up there as well, and a couple of the leading caps out there. Still got Vermeylen too, as those 2 yellow swim caps of her and Sian Rainsley are still lurking just on the back end of our leading group. Goodison in second behind Jeffcoat. The Australian leading the New Zealander. They make the turn for home straight away.
And although the temperature was quite nice, it was just over 20 degrees for the water, about 18 degrees. I noticed there was a bit of wind, and before they went down to the pontoon, everyone had jackets and coats on as well. So with that wind blowing, it probably felt a bit chilly to kind of stood there on the pontoon. So it doesn't, and it's still morning, it's still quite early, so the sun's coming up. It's going to get easier for these athletes as they go on throughout the race. But there was, yeah, those conditions, although they sound nice, there'll be a few athletes that maybe just didn't enjoy that little bit before the start.
Yeah, we know all about the breeziness down on these ocean courses, of course, after last week when the wind decided to knock out a few of our cameras and take them out of the equation over the weekend in Torremolinos.
Oh yeah, the wind was absolutely insane, especially for the junior races. And I was down there just before the junior women were about to go. I was like, I didn't actually know if they were going to be able to run the race because the barriers were moving. They had to kind of take all the, the sponsorship banners off at certain points and kind of anchor them down more, because everything was moving at one point. So yeah, a lot calmer than that, thankfully. I'm sure these athletes will be grateful. And look at the gap going already. Yeah,
there's a large group of about 6 that just making their way away from the rest of the pack, and it's all starting to filter out in terms of there's almost 3 separate groups now. A group of maybe 6 or so, as I say, up front, then another group of maybe 10 or 11 athletes behind that.
And with only 36 women in the field, we're going to end up with 3 kind of almost equal groups, it looks like, at this point.
Kira Hedson's the one who's taken the reins out of the front now, has got herself ahead of Emma Jeffcoat, so it's an Australian, and a New Zealander as our trio, who look like they're going to be finishing this first lap of this swim in that order. Almost sounds like a bad joke, but there's nothing funny about what's taking place out there in the water right now. Sterling performance from Kira Hedsland, another one with plenty of World Cup experience and World Triathlon experience to her name.
I'm not sure if that's Summer Rappaport, actually. It might be a 17, not an 11. It's really confusing with the 7s and 11s.
I think Sian Rainsley might be in that third place position.
Yeah, she was
Awful
very
play coming
close to the
back.
front. But at the, yeah, look, and it's handy they've swapped the lead here as well, just taking a little bit of pressure, whether it's intentional or not. They're sharing the lead, sharing the workload, and that's going to keep the pace high. And this is what they want, this group. And when they come out for that first lap, they're going to have a little look around. They're going to see that they're getting that gap. It's going to give them such a boost, and they're really going to push on again in the second lap because they know there's some faster runners that probably haven't made this front group.
I'm always willing to put my hands up and say when I'm wrong, and I'm certainly wrong in terms of our leader. It is Sian Rainsley. It is a 17 that is leading the way right now of the American, who is so keen to get back to, I suppose, full health finally once again after having a long spell out between September and March last year and at the start of this year. Winner twice here in Tongyeong in 2016 and 2017. Sian Rainsley knows how to get the job done.
Oh, she really does, and it's so good to see her back to fitness because she's all back racing. I know she's probably not at her full fitness yet because we know how good she can be, but she really has had a rough year. The back end of last year, she had a crash where she fractured her, I think it was her shoulder, her jaw, and her sacrum. So that involved liquid food for a certain period, and it's been such a fight back for her. It's so good to see her back on a start line. I know she thought her career was over a few months ago, so to be back here and racing, and she said relatively pain-free, is a massive win.
And at the moment, leading them through as well, which will feel even better for Sian Rainsley as she is the first out of the water, followed by Jeffco. Goodison's there as well for Vermeylen, making up the top 4. Rainsley finishing off the top 5. Is that Sarah Guerrero-Manso maybe coming out of the water? I thought I saw a 16, but again, my eyes may be deceiving me at this point. Either way, the leaders are already out into the water and onto lap number 2. Was Sarah Guerrero-Manso making up the top 6, and those are the 6 that have the gap over the rest of the field right now.
That's a nice little group there as well, isn't it? They've got over 8 seconds to the next group.
Yeah, but Tamara Gorman and Leah Konix are the ones that are driving the group behind them. Just looking further down the list, in 12th at the moment, Erica Ackerland already 22 seconds back, Sandra Dode 23 seconds back, the French woman to keep an eye on, and the woman wearing the number 1 cap, Gina Sereno, as well, back in 14th, also 23 seconds back, part of that second group, and certainly well in the pace still to be able to stay up with the leaders at this point. They won't want to see that stretch out too much more. Ainsley Thorpe as well, wearing the number 3 down there in 18th, almost 30 seconds back, as is Kira Hedgeland as well, wearing the number 11 up in 19th, as we see the official times coming through on the screen.
Yeah, that's been a fast first lap because an athlete like Ainsley Thorpe, you'd normally, from New Zealand, you'd normally expect her to be kind of maybe closer to the front. She's a really strong all-round athlete. She went to the Paris Olympics and the Tokyo Olympics. So they've got an 8-second gap at the moment, that front group, from the back of that front group to the front of the second group.
Basically the same gap that they have separating that front group between each other. It's really nicely basically strung out with about a second between each of them in that front 6.
So good to see Sian Rainsley back at the front of a race. She's always up there in the swim, World Champ Series, whatever it is, she's always up there. Normally that top 5 out the water, she is one of the best swimmers in triathlon and really showing the rest of the field how it's done.
Absolutely carving through the water right now. Tamara Gorman, I think, is the woman that's kind of splitting these two groups in the middle in that blue cap just off the rear of the front 6. And she's perhaps looking to make a break away from the stragglers just behind the leading 6 and get herself up on the coattails.
She's going to have a really big swim. She's going to make up the 8 seconds, which isn't that much over 750 metres. It's definitely doable, but she's going to have to swim as fast as Sian Rainsley or faster to catch back on, because all the athletes lined up behind Rainsley here, they're saving energy. It's so much easier, tucked into the slipstream, just you're going so much easier. Your effort level is such a lower percentage. I mean, you still have to swim, obviously, you still have to put some effort in, but Rappaport at the front is doing the hard work here.
Yeah, you can see Jeffcoat just behind Rappaport there, and you can see the waves crashing into the swim cap out the front of Summer Rappaport, whereas behind her, Jeffcoat just looks like she's carving through far calmer waters that are being separated as she sits in the wake of the American right now. Even so, she's making it look so easy out there. You can see that gap maybe is just starting to be extended slightly, and it does look like that Tamara Gorman is certainly falling back towards that middle group as opposed to making up any ground on the leaders at all.
Oh, the worst place to be. She's just in no man's land, isn't she? She can see that gap in front. She'll be lifting her head to sight and she'll see it there. It's agonising. I just need to get across to that gap. But at the front, yeah, Rappaport just looks so cool. I bet she's absolutely loving this as well. Clear water, being able to push the pace, you feel in control. It's a great place to be.
How much are you looking up and spotting that group in front if you are Gorman in that moment, if you're trying to get away from that chasing group and catch up with the leaders? Are you checking every other...
Yeah, she'd be looking at the sight. I mean, it's not as... Rappaport does have the hardest job here. You'll see she looked up then. Kind of every 2 to 3 strokes, Rapport's just checking that boy in front, and she's on the right track. Whereas the one athletes behind don't have to look up as much because they're just following that splash in front. Although then you have to trust that the athlete in front is going the right way, which is another matter. But Tamara Gorman, she will still be looking up because it's not as much. She's not really sighting on the boy. She is sighting those athletes in front. But yeah, you'd still probably look up every sort of. Maybe it's a bit less, 3 to 5 strokes. It really depends on the athlete and what they like to do. I mean, sometimes for the athletes in the middle of that group, what is the point? Like, you just kind of head down, just following that splash in front. And so some of the worst races I've had where you've just that bad position in the swim, you're in the middle of that group and you look up and you can see the athletes going away in front of you. They're swimming away from you. Like, there's nothing I can do at this point. I'm completely stuck. There's bodies everywhere. I can't... Like, it is, unless you're swimming really well, it's tough to get out of that situation.
The leaders continue to drive the pace up at the front, that front 6, and attentions will start to turn to transition in a few moments because they're going to start turning their way back towards the coastline now. Rappaport's next look up will be spotting her line all the way back to shore.
And it's quite a nice exit here because it's a really nice blue arch. So you're just looking up and glancing for that arch, or as the sun's coming up as well. So this is one thing you might do in the swim warm-up, is actually look for what you're sighting at, because it won't just be the arch or the buoy you're exiting. It might be a building or something that's behind. Pick something big behind to aim for, because if the sun's coming down and you can't see, or just a quick glance then, you're aiming for the 3rd skyscraper. I mean, I don't think at this point there is skyscrapers behind them, but just picking something rather than just the exit. But I think Rappaport looks to have all of this under control.
Yeah, it's a reasonably clear day this morning here in Korea. There's a few clouds also gathering and just giving us a break from the sunshine, but thankfully it's away to the left slightly, so the glare that the athletes will be facing into from the sun in terms of the reflection of the water as well, it's only really as they make those turns around the buoys and then start to make their way looking for home. Commanding swim out in front by the American. Continues to keep that pace, just churning out and chugging along. In a venue where there's certainly a tendency, as we've touched on already, to find those breakaways from some smaller groups. A group of 6 getting out in transition with around about 10 seconds or so maybe ahead of the next group. May just have a chance to try and escape away and do some damage out there on the bike if they've got the right work mentality between them to work as a group and get themselves away from the rest of the pack.
Yeah, I think they will have the right mentality. I know there's a few athletes in this group, especially, you mentioned Emma Jeffcoat had that 7th in Valencia. That was a group of 4 that came out and worked so efficiently and smoothly together. And it depends how motivated the second pack are. At the moment, we've got quite a small group here, so if they all work together, or even if 4 out of them works, then they should go away, because that large group behind will tend to be a little less organised.
Can be quite a grueling bike circuit because it is just such a large part of it just going up the hill. Keeping the power on and working as hard as you can. It's quite a fun way to go back down the hill, of course, when you get to take your breather, but there's no rest for the wicked, that's for sure, out there on the course. Jeffcoat staying on the toes of the leader. When I say the toes, I mean right on the toes, almost touching distance. Last buoy 5 of 6 they go. And the last one leads them home. This would be, I know we're writing the story, the narrative very early, but this would be a fantastic way to finish for Summer Rappaport if she can keep herself up at the front and if she can show that she is starting to get back to her very best. The 2 years before injury were something very special indeed in terms of her finishes on the World Cup stage and strong finishes as well on the WTCS calendar too.
Yeah, I think it really would mean a lot as well, especially when you've had those periods of illness and injury, and it means so much more when you come back. And like I said, she thought this was all over, so anything is a bonus now. I'm sure she's so happy to be out there, but she's putting herself in a fantastic position here.
She is going to be the first out of the water. Jeffcoat right with her, however, not been able to shake the rest of the 6 that are joining with. They're pretty much as they were coming out of the swim after the end of the first lap, as Sarah Guerrero-Manso is making up the last of those 6, and this will be the first 6 that will make their way into transition and get ready to get out onto the bike. 6 laps making up the 40-kilometre bike course.
Exactly the same gap. Sarah Guerrero, she was 8 seconds down after the first and 8 seconds down after that. But she's close enough. She's in with a touching distance, had a great transition there, and she's managed to get back to that main group. Jeffcoat was out first, just getting those feet in the shoes.
A little bit of time being taken. The leaders have around about a 30-second gap or so. 8 seconds, as you mentioned, Sarah Guerrero-Manso off the leader in 6th. Catherine Mace of Belgium, 32 seconds off the leaders. So this group can get moving and grooving nice and quickly. Then they do have a chance to get themselves some further down the line. Summer Rappaport, not the best transition for her. She's the last of the 6 out of transition, 7 seconds behind Emma Jeffcoat, as it's reshuffled slightly with Vermeylen taking her spot in 2nd. But I imagine that these 6 are all going to group up together unless Emma Jeffcoat really wants to blaze a trail out there on her own right now on the bike course.
I listened to Jolien Vermeylen's pre-race interview with World Triathlon. She said, I'm not the kind of person that goes on it alone. She said, but I want a small group at the front working really well. She said, if it's a big pack, she's like, don't like it. Has to be a small group. So she's got the perfect scenario. This is what she wanted pre-race. And she said she's going for the win. She's had a few World Cup podiums, a 2nd, 2 thirds. I mean, she must be desperate for that first World Cup win. She's been so close. I mean, agonising close. It's been a couple of sprint finishes that have made her into 2nd place.
Yeah, she ran out of gas just right at the end in Tisjavaros last year, didn't she, when we had that absolute thriller that was won by Tilda Manson. But Vermeylen was right there, right until the end, and she just couldn't kick when the leading pair made their push down the home straight. All of them valuable lessons to learn for the future, and if it can all pay dividends right now, that would be beautiful for the Belgians. Others are starting to try and make their way up with the leaders. Erika Akkerlund starting to drive and close that gap if possible. She's 31 seconds down the road from a fellow countrywoman, Summer Rappaport, as the last time split, and it will be very intriguing to see what the likes of Akkerlund and co, who do want to try and make up the ground on these 6, have when we get to the first real time split out there on the bike.
Yeah, we could see in the distance when we had that shot of the group at the front going back down the hill, we saw that group behind. Erika Akkerlund's at the front, really trying to push the pace, and she needs to do that to try and get some of the athletes working, to get them motivated. It's like, you've got to get that motivation. Come on, girls, let's do this. Let's try and chase down the front, because there'll be a lot of almost looking around and taking your time, but they've not got time for that. If the gap's 30 seconds already, if this group at the front works efficiently, then they could pull them back. The positive for the group at the front is sometimes on the downhill that if it's a big, large pack, it does tend to move a bit faster. They do tend to catch up there on the downhills, but because the group behind is it's not huge, I mean, it's bigger than this 6, but it's not massive. I think that's going to play to the front group's advantage.
You can just see that chasing group in the rear of the shot, trying to make the ground up on the leading 6s. Vermeylen getting out of the saddle slightly for a second. Others joining her as well as Sarah Guerrero-Manso tries to push just to get up to pace and stay on the rear wheel of Emma Jeffcoat in 5th.
I think we've got
Vermeylen, though, doing the pushing right now.
Sorry, there's about 16 athletes in that pack behind. And then we've got a third pack gone out of transition as well. And that includes the 2 Italian athletes, Malozzi and Arpinelli. So they've missed that front group. So that group as well is going to be trying to, and Shimanova as well, who had a World Cup podium last year. So they're 3 of the athletes that have really missed out. So they're going to be trying to work hard to get that third group back to the second. So no one can rest at this point. The first few laps is just head down, just go for it and try and pull back some positions.
Yeah, the athlete from the Czech Republic in that far group, about 50 seconds adrift, actually had that podium here, wasn't it, in Tongyeong, the 3rd place that got herself a World Cup podium to add to the medal collection. It's going to be a real hard graft, though, to make it back if these ladies at the front can really start working. Just interesting to see Vermeylen's just fallen off the back a little bit there, but quickly getting up. By the way, just has the best looking bike out there on the course. I don't know if these are custom colours that she's got, but it is one that certainly stands out compared to the slightly more traditional dark black that we see leading them through right now.
Yeah, it was just that steeper uphill section. We saw all the athletes get out the saddle, and Eva Goodison went to the front, and Vermeylen definitely came under pressure a little bit there as we hit that steep section. You will get athletes that are better on hills than other athletes. Some athletes are better at steep hills, some athletes are better at the drags, but it looks like Eva Goodison's in really good bike shape.
And with Jeffcoat as well taking a turn up at the front. So leaders come round and through and then start the climb once again.
I always think this is probably the most demoralising part of this course, because they turn and just see that group behind, and it feels like they're coming up so fast because the group is descending down.
Is it not a good sighter as well, though, to be able to see and gauge where the group is in comparison, as we've
lost,
seen 5s turn to 6s turn to 5, hasn't it?
Sarah Guerrero-Manso?
Yeah, it looks like the Spaniard Sarah Guerrero-Manso was dropped back, and I'm not sure if she's dropped back into the clutches of the group behind, or if she's maybe had a problem, because...
Yeah, she was there on the uphill section then. It looked like she just really pulled to the side, so I'm not sure exactly what happened. Maybe there's a mechanical problem, but she definitely pulled off at one point.
We'll try and get confirmation of that as quickly as possible from people out there on the course. Give us an update on what's happened to the Spanish athlete. It's hard graft, isn't it? You have to enjoy the downhill sections while you can, because the uphills come thick and fast and steep as well at certain points on this bike. See Vermeylen already puffing a bit out in front. Everybody having their turn out of the saddle to keep grinding. Is that gap just getting closer from the trailing group?
Yeah, it looks like it from this angle. Vermeylen, who did struggle a little bit on the first uphills, really doesn't want the same thing to happen, so she's made sure she's positioned herself at the front. She can dictate the pace a little bit, or if anyone does push on, she's able to kind of jump straight on their wheel.
She's the one now trying to drive the pace around this downhill as well and drag everybody else with her. So at least where it gets a little more fun, being able to take these twists and turns, but it's also where, as they get into town, the bike course gets that little bit more technical as it weaves round, goes round another tight turn before going back through the blue carpeted area.
Yeah, it is a big effort up the hill, isn't it? And then you just kind of on the downhill so it's not relaxing because you're going quite fast, but you have to keep your wits about you. But it is that recovery time on this downhill. And being brave as well for the athletes who are a bit nervous. There is athletes that get nervous on the descents. It's not a massively technical course, but yeah, you still have to be able to push the pace with the other athletes.
It's just that bottom section, as I say, that you get a bit twisty and turny, and it's about as technical as it gets. But
yeah, nothing too technical on the descent section. It is just that flatter bit at the back. A little bit of communication there between the athletes as well, just trying to get them working, trying to get them moving, but they are down to 5. And you know, our last shot, it did look like that chase group were closing up on them, but it's really hard to tell, yeah, where where we are until we get that timing split.
Well, the trouble is as well, and particularly at that last point that we saw the chase group, you've just had a bit of a grueling uphill while the chase group has just done a very fast downhill section from that 180-degree turn, which means that they're going to look a lot closer than maybe they actually are in terms of the time that it takes for them to get to that same point. But as I say, we'll give you an update as soon as they go through the next bike split to see exactly how big or how small that gap has gotten. But you can't see any sign of the chase group right now, that's for sure. They're far and away in the distance behind, but they're also making up the ground, this front group. Plenty of pace on these downhill sections.
You see them just trying to get the group working together. Jolien Vermeylen's done a really big turn on this downhill section. She's wanted to keep the pace on, keep it honest, but she's pedalled nearly all the way down that hill, and I think they have had a bit of a headwind on that section too. So you just don't want to freewheel. You've got to keep it pressure on the pedals, and I think they're all working really well together. There's certain sections where athletes won't be as confident. Like we know Summer Rappaport has had issues with bike confidence in the past. She's an incredibly strong athlete, but has lost time on maybe the more technical sections. But she's going to be a massive asset on those kind of the uphill sections. She's always does well on hilly courses like Carlo Vavari World Cup because she's great on those kind of courses. So you want to use that strength at a certain part and then let her sit in on the downhills where maybe she's not quite as good. So you really get to know the feel of the group, who can take which lead at which point.
She can take the confidence, I suppose, from the others around her on the downhill section, and then, as you say, utilise that power when needed to drive them up on the pace. This is the tight bottom section of the bike course, the other 180-degree turn, the hairpin turn that will slow them right down once again, and they'll have to build up that steam and build up the power once more to get back up to pace as they come along the waterfront once more.
And we're talking about the chase group, it is going to be a really motivated chase group. You've got Ackerland in there, Gorman, you've got Konig, who we talked about, who just come off that other World Cup podium recently, Dode. So lots of athletes who've come in here with that potential to win the race, and they're in the second pack. So it's going to be motivated, but yeah, I'm really excited.
Get a rough idea of exactly how much distance has been put between the leaders and everybody else. We are getting on our timing chart that Sara Guerrero Manso has gone through. I don't think that is necessarily accurate in terms of first place out there. We will get a confirmation of everything. It's now saying that Sara Guerrero Manso is first through transition right now, and we are way past T1 at this point. It's this leading group of 5 out of the lower section and start the long road uphill once again.
Yeah, and the athletes might be flying blind as well. They might not have any coaches out there kind of giving them the timing splits. Certain races you'll get coaches there and different things, but towards the back end of the year with the World Cup, where there isn't any Olympic points on offer, where it's that post-Olympic almost like little bit of a lull with everything. Most of the athletes here would be unsupported, just traveling with teammates, so they're unlikely to get some splits out there. And it's good to see the chase group. We've got the athletes who we talked about who are at the front. They're really trying to get this group motivated and working.
Yeah, Alissa Konig there now taking a turn right towards the front of that chase group, and she too looking to drive the pack on as quickly as possible. I was going to ask you about how many representatives you thought maybe would be out here this week with the athletes and how they'd be able to get times across, at least down at the seafront and down near transition for them on the bike, because there's obviously going to be nobody stood there up at the midway point of this hill climb, for instance, out there on their own giving that sort of information.
Yeah, and it's hard to know how many federations or might have sent a coach or somebody out there, or even if an athlete's traveling with, you know, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a mum, a dad. There might be a relative or somebody out there that could give a bit of a time split that you would trust. Because there's some that you might not be able to trust. But yeah, I think just generally they're going to have to look at that dead turn and see where they are, see what's happening. But I think from this shot last time, we could see that chase pack in the distance, whereas we can't this time. So it looks like that gap might have gone out a little bit.
Gina Sereno and Alissa Konig, the two that were upping the ante in terms of that chase group. You can see them there. We try to work out whether this group of 5 out of the front are extending that gap. Of course, we do often see as well, though, that you can maybe get 3 or 4 laps into one of these bike courses and everything looks like the leading group are being able to make a bit of headway, and then suddenly that chase group decides over the last half or so of the bike race that, all right, we're going to catch up. Actually, we've done the graft of just sitting in, and we're going to put pedal to the metal, so to speak, and just claw you back in for right at the end. Yeah,
it does happen, doesn't it? We've seen all kinds, and I say normally on this course we do see things tend to come together. I guess if that's that larger pack, that speed they carry through the downhills, that's when they seem to catch on. But again, this pack isn't that big, so it's not a massive advantage to have that many athletes in there.
It doesn't look like the group behind them either is exactly making any ground on this second group either.
No, they've stayed at a sort of equal time for equal distance from what we saw last time. Alissa Konig there, she's not willing to let this race get away from her. She wants to be in that front pack, and she's continuing to drive, and she's hoping that's going to motivate others. She's going to get some other athletes working with her. Jolien Vermeylen just struggling a little bit on that section. She was at the front, really pushing the pace through most of that lap, that second half, but this section, she just struggles a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a bit more gritted teeth for the Belgian. Just on the way up towards the turn as see Konig and co. Look how many of them are out of the saddle for these incline sections as they work hard to try and keep the pace going. And there you see Vermeylen's already on a downhill section right back at the front already. What we are seeing as well is a lot of rotation at the front of this group. Everybody is, I know we had Vermeylen for a large part of that downhill section, but on the way up, it's 3-4 different lead changes up towards the midpoint of this bike.
Yeah, and very motivated, working together really well. And they all know this is a great scenario for them. I mean, Sian Rainsley won a World Cup at the start of this year in Hong Kong. Summer Rappaport's won so many World Cups, and she's won World Champ Series. She's got so many wins. Vermeylen's been on the podium a few times. Goodison hasn't. She's probably the little bit more, and Jeff Coates obviously won the World Cup podiums, not for a little while. I mean, Goodison, she had a prolapse disc. It was a year or two ago, and it really hampered the early part of her season. But she's come back quite strong with a 15th in Rome. She's kind of in that top 15 realm for the World Cups. But this is a great opportunity. This is the one that catapults you forward, and you're not thinking at it at this point in the bike with that group of 6, but you know it's a good scenario, so you can kind of get excited. It keeps you pushing hard and think you know that this is a better scenario than you've been in previous races.
We compare as well, even just the number of races that she's been in compared to the others around Goodison with 38 starts or World Triathlon events to her name. You compare it to Summer Rappaport, 92 starts. There is a golfing experience more than anything else. And
yeah,
look, even if she doesn't end up fighting for a podium place or whatever happens with this group, it's a great learning experience to have around some very experienced and very strong athletes down there.
Yeah, and you have to make the most of these opportunities. For some of these athletes, this is the dream scenario. Good swim, small group away working. So yeah, make the most of the group that you're in, because you don't always get these opportunities. That's our third pack there, just coming round. Dead turn.
Not exactly, they're only just getting a sight, aren't they, of the second group, the chase group that's just in front down the road. So you get a rough idea of the distances and the ground that's having to be made up. It's the chase group working hard once again. The uphill sections, it's leading 5 are already hard and fast downhill. Again, it's the Belgian out in front, leading them through, paving the way. Not a single hint of lift on these downhill sections. There's no whirring of the stationary pedals at all. Sarika Nakayama taking her turn up at the front, the Japanese athlete wearing the number 8 today.
A few athletes in the top 10 today from Japan.
Nakayama is consistently in around those kind of top 10 places in the Asian Cup events. The WTCS series maybe hasn't exactly provided the same sort of level of success. 46th in Calgary earlier this year, but she does have finishes around about the top 15 or so on World Cup events to her name as well. 17th here last year. She would like to be in more of a hunt, similarly to Alissa Konig, I'm sure, who would like to see that gap being closed down as quickly as possible with the leaders, but they are still out on their own. It's still Vermeylen as it was that first lap of the bike that is leading them down through this bottom half of the downhill section.
You have to be fearless in breakaways like this because you can't be thinking about the run at this point. You're just thinking about getting as much time. So having athletes that are like Vermeylen there who goes to the front and just does this massive turn on the downhill, that's the athlete you want there. She's not worried about what's going to happen later on in the race. She's not thinking, oh, I need to save my legs to outsprint someone later. It's like, at this point in the race, they are a team. They're all from different nations, but they are a team trying to pull away from this chase group to give themselves the best opportunity possible. So it's that fearless and don't worry about the run. Let's just work together. Let's stay in the moment. Let's just focus on what we're doing now. It's quite a scary place to be sometimes because you're going up a hill at certain points. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to run 10K again soon. But you don't want those thoughts coming in. It's just about maximising that group and taking advantage of the opportunity.
There's an element of trust, I suppose, as well in the athletes around you, that you are all going to work together and there isn't going to be somebody who's going to decide to just sit there on the rear wheel and just kind of coast it through and hope that they're taking up the energy reserves for the end kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there might always be someone who you think, oh, you're not really pulling your weight as much as you should be. But I think in this group here, with it only being the 5 athletes, I think they're all pretty committed. I think you might have more of that maybe in a bigger group, but here we've got, or maybe over the last lap or two, but here we seem to have had the moment at this point where they're just coming up to the end of this lap. Everyone looks really motivated and looks like they're pushing the pace.
It's always interesting when we get to hear the brief snippets maybe of conversation up at the front of these bike groups, or when you see some of the body language that gets used that's so essential for that on-road communication. You can tell maybe who's irking some of the other athletes around them if they're not taking their turn up at the front, and get encouraged to do exactly that at certain points. But the rotation continues right now.
We haven't heard too much from this group, have we? They've been pretty smooth, I think.
It's as if they've all been planning this all together beforehand, because they're certainly working in sync.
I think they would have planned it beforehand, but you never know if it's going to come off. Is that you might plan that this is the ideal scenario, but something happens. Sometimes racing just doesn't go your way. You feel tired in the water. You just don't have your best swim. You get on the bike and think, oh, there's nothing on my legs today. So this is always the best scenario for these athletes, especially the good swimmers. But it doesn't always come off.
Helen, you're making it sound like there's a cabal suddenly behind curtains in the night before the race, just plotting and working out how they're going to do this. At the moment, it's working very well for these 5 out in front as they start the 3rd lap of 6 and get so much closer to the halfway point here.
And you say 3rd lap of 6, oh wow, it does feel like they've been racing a while already on the bike. So really important, especially in this group here where they are working together. The effort level is going to be high throughout the whole bike course. Taking in the nutrition, sticking to your plan. You don't want to get carried away. So, oh, I'm in a breakaway. This is really exciting. Like, stick to your plan. Make sure you keep eating, keep taking on your drink, because otherwise you just don't want to run out of energy at a certain point in the race. So sticking to that. And I'm sure every athlete in the race has gone in with a certain amount of nutrition that they want to take on during the race.
How easy is it when you're in a group like this to forget about nutrition? If you're all together working as a group of 5 and you're taking constant rotations and you're so determined to find that separation, is it easy to suddenly forget, oh, I need to make sure I keep hydrating, keep using those gels, etc., whatever's needed to keep the energy levels up?
I think it is if you're probably less experienced. I think the more experienced athlete would maybe just stick to the plan and kind of remember to do it. But if you're a young athlete, you might kind of get a bit carried away by the whole thing and forget to do things like that. But everyone makes mistakes like that, especially when you're an athlete coming into the sport and you might take too much nutrition and that causes cramps on the run or something. There's always mistakes to be made, which is like you say with Summer Rappaport, having that many starts, she's probably made all those mistakes, and she's probably pretty dialed in with what she does in an Olympic distance race, what she needs to take on board. So yeah, I think this group at the front seemed pretty well drilled.
So rotation continues behind as well with the chasing group. Katrina Mays taking her turn at the front now, the Belgian.
I feel like this is the race of comeback stories with Alissa Konig there. She had ankle reconstruction, only a year ago, and it was really kind of, you think, well, how am I going to get back from this and get back out racing? You're starting on crutches. It feels like such a long way to go. So she's done really well, got a new training group, and she's improved and improved all throughout the year. And I think it's said she was disappointed when she found out she wasn't going to the Olympics for the Swiss team, but she understood that she wasn't ready, but she just felt like if it had been another year, like she would have, if she hadn't had the surgery then, she feels like she's an athlete on the up. That's what she's heading towards. That's where her trajectory is.
Yeah, missing a quarter almost of that Olympic cycle can be so damaging to the dreams of making it to those games. And we see that cycle. We're already talking about the next games, LA 2028 already. People have already started to discuss how the end of this season can set a tone for what is next to come over the next few years in preparation for LA 28. Although,
and it's an exciting time always that year post-Olympics, because you have so many new faces emerge on the scene, because the athletes who have been through several Olympic cycles, they almost need to take a back step for a little bit, and that might mean doing other races or doing something a little bit different, because it's pretty intense, that whole, it's 4 years of your life dedicated to one day. And if you've done that 2 or 3 times, there is that fatigue that sets in. So it always gives opportunity for the new faces to come through, the younger athletes. And we see who's going to emerge and, be kind of competing for it in the next 4 years.
I think I've had a few discussions with various people about, I don't know how and where the motivation necessarily comes from that day after the Olympics, and you wake up because you've had 4 years culminating in that one day, and then you either have to go again or potentially say, right, that might be the only time that I can do that, and where the motivation to come back and get onto these World Cups, the World Championships, etc. comes from. And it's incredible for those athletes that do that and continually find that motivation to go through it 2-3 times maybe in their career.
Yeah, and I think some of the athletes who are racing here have raced the Olympics, like Vermeylen, but she wanted to race out the rest of the season. And some athletes some athletes are contracted to race certain races, so they're back out racing or doing a bit different, doing longer distance. But yeah, it's all different. Athletes deal with it in different ways, and to go from that big focus for 4 years to nothing is a big shock to the system. So it's almost easier some ways to actually keep racing.
Around about 45 minutes, they take the turn, then the leading group, and head back down the road. We have to spot it by our own eyes rather than anything else in terms of checking these gaps. We've just got a slight technical problem with some of the timing charts coming through. So we'll do our best to spot it for you instead.
Yeah, not coming through, so we are getting obviously the visual that gap does seem to have gone out. We were about 30 seconds coming out of transition, but I would say it's gone up from that.
Yeah, I was questioning whether it be around about a minute or so, maybe for the chase group behind. As you can see them now making their way up that hill climb, and it might take about 20 seconds or so for them to get to that turn from that sort of position. So yeah, it could be around about a minute 10 possibly by the time that those ladies make the turn.
Yeah, we're just seeing them approaching it now.
I'd say that's around about a minute 10, I reckon.
Yeah, about that. About a minute, I think just my stopwatch on about a minute 5. So that's gone up 30 seconds since transition. So not as much as I thought it would, but a minute is a good gap. But some of the runners in this field will be able to run down a minute. They might not be able to get to the top of the podium, but they could get to a podium from this point. The front group will need a bigger gap if they want to. I mean, Sian Rainsley's already won a World Cup this year. So she knows that she can do it, but she's going to want to do it with maybe a bigger gap, especially with the likes of someone like Sandra Dode, Gina Sereno, even Alissa Konig in her recent running, how well she's doing.
Yeah, there's still another 3 laps to go after this one. There is still a chance to edge out another 30 to maybe 40 seconds if this group at the front can continue working hard and there isn't enough of a retaliation from those behind. What is too difficult to run down to get up to a podium position, do you think, on this course? And it is a technical run. It does have some slightly steeper sections, shall we call it, towards the end of that run course.
Yeah, it is a tough run, and I think for the last, I did read what it said in the last, since 2013, 9 of the 10 women's races have been won by the fastest runner. So this is very much a fast runner's course. I think especially with that little hill on the end as well, it does play into the run strength because it does come late in the lap as well. So
just saps a bit of the energy when you're feeling it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they're going to need it. I think they'd need 2 minutes. I think for some of the runners. I mean, some of the front group, if we see Summer Rappaport in the form that we've seen her in the past, she doesn't need 2 minutes. She could run that from anywhere in the field. But it's really hard to know. We've got a few athletes, say, coming back, like Summer Rappaport, she is coming back after kind of a really tough 12 months. So we're not sure exactly how much her fitness has progressed, maybe from Tizzy World Cup, where we saw her recently, in Hamburg World Series. So how much has her fitness come on? And it'll come on quickly, just with that consistent training and not being injured and ill, and also being happier. If you're a happier athlete, you're losing the niggles. It's not even about more training. It's just being in a good headspace is going to make you more excited to get back out there racing.
I'm sure the headspace will certainly be helped by the fact that her and her group out there at the front are continuing to eke out that advantage over the rest of the field as it stands. And for the chase group, it doesn't look like there's much coming from the rearguard action either, so they can just focus in on what's straight ahead of them down the road, albeit around about 1 minute 10 down the road ahead of them. And bringing them through once more, once again taking her turn up at the front for a large part of the downhill section, although she hasn't been there quite as long as the first 2 laps, the Belgian.
Goodison again doing a big turn on the front. Come from a swim background and then went to the US to go to university there, so she ran through the university in California. So many of these athletes have had quite a diverse way into the sport. There doesn't seem to be many that go straight from a triathlete in. There's some that focus more on running or through swimming. It is really, there's no one path in, which I always think is one of the nice things about triathlon, as opposed to some sports where obviously single sports you just have to go through that route.
Can you imagine finishing, say, being a high-level swimmer, and as you get out of the water, somebody says, do you fancy going for a quick bike ride and a run after this? First time, you probably look at them and ask a few questions about what they were thinking, but when it all clicks together and you realise you could do it, it's probably a fantastic feeling for those athletes.
I know, I think for a lot of the athletes that grew up as swimmers or competitive swimmers, it's such a relief to do triathlon and go outside. You don't have to do everything. Well, I think, especially if you're in maybe European or in the UK.
We have the three company group, 5 members.
So the leaders come through.
Just seeing that group on the other side, aren't we?
Once again, we will try and do our best to work out the timing splits for you. Sian Rainsley leading them through then after 50 minutes and 12 seconds to finish the bike lap, as it looks like we've got the timing charts up and running now. Emma Jeffcoat and Eva Goodison, Vermeylen and co going through. I do remember last year, I think it was, we did have some breakaways that then all got a bit grouped up towards the end of it. Definite push from Gwen Jorgensen in that second group to close down the gap as much as possible in the women's event, and then obviously ran it into the ground on the sprint finish on the run. Very powerful indeed, and it was just like watching her back to her best once again, Gwen. Oh, how powerful a runner she is and how good she was in her pomp a few years ago on the World Triathlon Championship Series.
Yeah, and World Triathlon has the 3 levels of racing. We have that top, that World Championship Series. The second level is the World Cup, the second tier, and then under that is the Continental Cup. So as Gwen Jorgensen had quite a long time out of the sport, she had to get back into racing Continental Cups, World Cups, to get her starts on the World Championship Series. And that's one of the reasons is because the American women are so strong. She had to be in the top 5 American women to get a start, which is incredibly hard. I think we had 5 American women ranked inside the top 30 in the world. So it was a really big ask to do it. And she has done it. She's back to that World Championship Series level of racing. But we miss seeing her in the World Cups then, where she does really bring an excitement. And we do see her lighting it up with that amazing run.
It certainly brings an element of star power for the woman from the nation of the Star Spangled Banner. So you see her fellow countrywoman Gina Sereno still continuing to push up front with Alissa Konig. Those two seem to be the ones that are really driving that pace off that second group, and it's no surprise considering they came into this with high expectations of being able to be sat at least in with a chance of a podium finish. Sereno with that excellent 8th place in way high on the World Triathlon Championship Series. Last World Cup saw a podium as well in Carlaveri, and a second at Vina del Mar towards the end of last year on the World Cup stage.
And with Sereno, I mean, that 8th in Weihai, 3rd in Carlaveri, both Olympic distances and really hard hilly courses. So these hills today do really suit her. She does go well on them. We can see her at the front here, really pushing the pace. Some of the athletes behind really struggling. And she's probably one of the few athletes that is balancing a career alongside her triathlon as well. She is. She works for NASA. She's a propulsion engineer. So incredibly interesting life to be balancing both of those quite intense jobs at the same time.
Let's see what NASA have got to say about her bike and whether they can reduce some of the weight in it and keep it as strong and powerful as she needs it to be. It's probably quite useful having some of the aerospace designers around her to help her out with some of that stuff. She at the moment though still just trying to eke into the gap and into that time.
And this group haven't given up, that second group, have they? Because I think sometimes we see that almost dejection set in. It's like, oh, the gap's going, it's getting further away. But they've really kept driving. And there's been about 4 or 5 that every time we've seen that group, they're near the front. They're really trying to keep that tempo high.
I know it happens quite often, but I have to say the last time that I've personally been at a triathlon and seen a breakaway succeed like this has been a fair bit of time ago, to be honest. I swear every other race that I end up covering with yourself here at World Triathlon ends up being a breakaway that gets eaten up right at the end or within the last few laps or so of the bike. So it's really interesting to see how this group of 5 are continuing to work, as Vermeylen just taking a little bit of hydration off the back of that group, and she'll have to strive to work hard and get back onto the rear wheel once again. Doesn't want to get dropped off and lost at this point.
No, she'll always work her way back on.
Nakayama back at the front again. She too has been another one that's certainly taken her chances in the rotation out there at the front, but the red top of Alissa Konig has been either first or second or third in that group almost all the time.
Just on that shot there, we could see that 3rd chase pack in the distance as well. So I don't know whether that gap is coming down or if it's just the camera angle, but it feels like the groups have kind of hung at those spots, isn't it? Even in the swim, we separated into 3 groups quite early on, and it has stayed there.
Marta Pintanel Raimundo taking her turn out at the front, the Spanish athlete. Second in her last race coming into this in October at the European Cup event in Sueta.
She's a good runner, Pintanel. Raced cross country for Spain in the under-23 category. She does a lot of duathlon as well.
55.25 at that turn, the leaders, so it'll be the time just to keep in the back of the mind when we see the chase group come through. May give an opportunity as well just on this section to be able to judge whether that gap has gone out a bit more. So there you see them. Erica Ackerland up there at the front as well, another American.
Ackerland's done a little bit of long distance racing this year as well, and she found out she wasn't going to the games. She kind of used that period in the middle of the year to try something different, do some different style of racing. She also raced in Weihai recently. Yeah, that 3rd group maybe is catching the 2nd group.
Starting to make up a bit of the ground, perhaps.
I think the gap might have gone out a little bit, not loads, maybe 5-10 seconds, but it is going the wrong way for this group. Holly Elliott taking them round.
Maybe around about 20 seconds 1 minute 20, they're off. So yeah, another 15 seconds maybe or so added to that time, which per lap, it's another 30 seconds after that. Could be looking at maybe almost a minute and a half, maybe more than that for this chase group to try and eat into. Could be around about 2 minutes if it gets really bad for them in terms of keeping up the pace. As Vermeylen again, look at that, straight on the front on this downhill section. Absolutely no messing around from the Belgian.
Another Belgian working at the front of the second group. I think the third pack on the road had a really good lap then. They really did seem to claw back a bit of time on the second group.
So that second group, the chase pack, so to speak, the off the leaders, 123 back on Sian Rainsley, the last bike split that we had. And that chase group's only about 20 seconds back. Simonova, the athlete from the Czech Republic, leading them through at 1:45. Alissa Konig was 1:27 at the last split that we've been able to get. So there are only 20 seconds separating the second and third group.
I think that's coming down as well, isn't it? And that third group, they're getting closer and closer, and that's not good news for that second group, because when those two groups merge, there tends to be a little bit of slowing. Perfect time to attack if anyone's going to go off the front and really try and make a break on their own, or maybe with one or two others to claw back a bit of time.
Does mean that group will, if it does end up joining together, will be a group around about 23 athletes, which in a field of 36 is a sizable number.
Yeah,
it's around about a third of that field all in one place with 5 others down the road. And as you mentioned, the bigger the group, the slower it could potentially come, although I imagine the likes of Alissa Konig will see that as maybe an opportunity to, right, well, we're just going to go at our own pace, and if you want to follow, try and follow.
So Sarah Guerrero Manso has come up as a DNF after transition 1, so she was there on that first half a lap on the bike, so maybe a mechanical issue, because it was seemed like a sudden stop.
We saw her get out of transition.
We did, yeah. She was halfway at that first hill, so maybe got out and there was, a puncture or a mechanical.
2 Korean athletes have unfortunately had to DNF as well. Min-So Kim after the first lap of the bike, and Jin-Hyun Kim, actually another one, Soo-Yun Lee as well, has also gone on the second lap of the bike. So
there was a couple of athletes just being lapped. So I think that, and again, that's that standard difference in the World Cups, especially when they're smaller fields, and you can pretty much have any of the athletes come in, and the Koreans will have more athletes here because it's a home race.
Particularly when you've got a driving force that is very much 5 of the best athletes that we have in the field right now out at the front, with no let up whatsoever. Fantastic aerial pictures that we get from our drone coverage here on World Triathlon.
Yeah, so we're on 1:23 through that last lap, and they'll be looking to increase that. I think if they can get that up to 2 minutes, that would be a fantastic place to be. I mean, they might not need those 2 minutes, and especially if we see some fast running from behind.
It's a nice cushion to have, isn't it, just in case. You'd rather have it than not, if possible. So you don't want to completely drain the legs complete for that run. As we hit the hour mark here in Tongyeong, as the sun continues to come out. The early morning is certainly getting further and further away from us. We're getting a little further away. There's a little look back there. Is that Rainsley out the front? We just have a look back and saying, look, come on, folks. Not done yet.
Oh, Goodison.
Yeah, Goodison, the athlete from New Zealand, in fact, the one to have a look around and just ask if anybody else is going to come with her. They all oblige eventually.
Yeah, and Goodison's been really motivated, hasn't she? She's been at the front. She's really tried to get that group working, not afraid to go to the front and do a big turn. Really impressive riding. Maybe a similar position to last time. We'll see when they come through for their timing.
Vermeylen leading them through that time after 1 hour and 45 seconds. The lead group separated by 1 second.
Jolien Vermeylen, so she went to the Paris Olympics. Unfortunately, the Belgian team couldn't then race in the relay. One of their team members got sick, so massively disappointing for them. The Belgium Hammers, a fantastic relay team, but she has got that Olympic experience, and I'm sure she's an athlete that'll be wanting to to go for another cycle. And she's such a bubbly personality on the circuit. I do love it when we get one of her interviews. So I'm kind of hoping to see her on the podium today.
Not that you have any favouritism or bias at all in these events, not a chance. But
whoever gives the best interview, that's who we want.
Vermeylen does have that effervescent personality, as well as, of course, the drive and grit determination when needed out there on the course.
But then there's also like a Summer Rapport, that kind of comeback story after, you know, almost thinking it's over, like to be back there racing. There's so many good stories, and you've got Sian Rainsley there as well. So she's been on the British Triathlon funding, the UK Sport funding programme for a number of years, and she had a really rough year last year, a couple of injuries. She also has Crohn's disease. So to be competing as an elite athlete with Crohn's disease is absolutely incredible. I'm sure there's not actually that many out there. And she lost her funding this year. And she said, well, yeah, I didn't perform well enough, but she's really had to think, well, she's had to go all in. It's either I'm going to have to stop or this year has to be good. And she's had a really positive year, getting that World Cup win at the start of the year, quite consistent. I know she definitely got tired at the last few races, but has been home with a good training block. So it's been an interesting year for her as well. There's kind of a lot of stories in all parts of the race today.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that win the start of the year in Hong Kong on the World Cup event. You have your funding pulled and immediately be able to produce a result like that, which must give an athlete so much confidence as well, that look, even if the funding isn't there, they know that the ability is there more than anything else. It gives you a wonderful foundation to start to build your year of events on. When you have a fair bit of early success, the gap up by about 10 seconds or so, maybe 7 seconds added to it by the lead group at the start of this fifth lap of 6, 1:31 now. Alissa Konig bringing the trailing group round behind the front five.
And they're all together now. That the third group did manage to catch the second, but the second pack have done a really good job. From the way this front group are working, and we've had more eyes on them through the coverage, I thought that gap will be going out further. So I think the second group have done a really good job because they're not organised. It is just that select group of athletes that are coming to the front and just really driving it on the key sections, you know, those uphills where they've got to keep the pressure up and the tempo up on.
Now you see it again, the number of times that we've switched to a shot of Alissa Konig and she's been out of the saddle and pushing hard up at the front. No surprise her doing it again alongside Kira Hedgeland there.
But she's really fighting for this, isn't she? She's not willing to sit there and let someone else do the work, because there are athletes in this group who are good runners that we haven't seen at the front. So they're the athletes, and that might be through, maybe they're not as good on the bike, they're not as able, or maybe they're just thinking, well, I'm just going to let the others do it. But we have seen Konig, Sereno, they're at the front. They really want this. They've come in as kind of the top-ranked athletes, Sereno wearing #1, and they are fighting to get their way back to the front of the race.
Once Vermeylen just dropping away slightly on another of the uphill sections. Konig finally relinquishing the lead of that chase group, but again not going too far away from the front of it.
Oh, Vermeylen again, just struggling on that uphill section. She really doesn't seem to have that top-end power you need to produce. And they say maybe when she gets out this saddle, the others, it's always Goodison on the front here, but she really puts the pressure on this section. And we see Vermeylen's always pretty much able to claw her way back on the downhill, but she does descend well, as we've seen over the last few laps.
The Italian Arpinelli, Costanza Arpinelli, the one who's starting to take a turn at the front now as the front four. Vermeylen just trailing just behind them.
I think the Italian athletes would be happy to be in this group, because when they came out the water maybe that far down, there probably would have been a little bit of panic setting in, and luckily they've had athletes to work with, and we haven't seen the third group much, but when we have, the Italians have been quite close to the front trying to get that group motivated.
Vermeylen has been able to make her way back onto the front. Just give it a few moments. She will probably be there and probably be out at the front on the downhill section once again, although she does seem to be slightly further back than we've seen her at this position.
And that sometimes comes from losing concentration as well. You maybe not as focused and you think, oh, right, the group's going, and then it's such a big effort to get back. We have seen her come under pressure on that steeper section a couple of times, and the percentage gradient goes up to 13 to 15%, so it is steep.
Usual faces out in front in the meantime. Serious power being shown by Konig in terms of always leading pretty much on the majority of the uphill sections that we see this chase group on.
Vermeylen's just on the back now, isn't it? So she's had a hard almost kilometre there of chasing back on.
Might be another 15 seconds or so added to the time of that chase group as they start to come round now. Maybe even a bit more than that. 1:05.57 is the time when the leaders took the turn. 1:07, about 1:07.37 almost as the chase group comes through. So they are almost 2 minutes back now, around about 1:45 or so. Another 15 seconds to it if they can on this final lap. Be a very, very good morning's work on the bike from those leaders. Need a reaction from somewhere from this group.
I think they have done well. 'Cause I think that gap could have blown out at a certain point. That they have kept the motivation high, especially when you get to that lap 4 and it's gone to 1:30. But I think they've still kept themselves in the race there. Just judging on maybe how some people have run in the past. I say Emma Jeffcoat was in that breakaway in Valencia. There were 4 athletes and she finished 7th. They were a minute ahead of the rest of the chase back, so that's a minute over the 5K. So there is potential for people. I mean, Jeffcoat's running might have come up a bit of a level since then as well, and we are on a hilly course, which athletes run different. There's lots of variables, but you have to look at the times. And a minute 30 to 2 minutes, some of these athletes will be able to run that down.
And the unknown as well, for instance, as we've discussed already with Summer Rappaport and how she is going to be able to handle then a run course, a difficult run course, a potentially grueling run course of 10 kilometres. And, you know, has she got it in her yet or not to be able to really compete out there on the run after particularly a very intense bike as well with these ladies up front. All questions that will have answers very, very soon indeed. You just see there trying to tuck in behind in about 3rd position in this group. Forcing her way to the front now. Just a few words being barked out there by the chasing group. And again, just falling off the back slightly. And
Rappaport there on that corner. But Vermeylen, from what we saw of those first few laps, where she was the one really pushing the pace on, especially on the downhill, it looks like she's maybe just tired a little bit over this.
She moves towards the front suddenly.
She heard us, didn't she?
Well, I did wonder if Ackland had just got caught behind Vermeylen as she dropped off slightly, which is why she then nipped around the Belgian rather quickly and got back up with this lead group. It does seem to be that Vermeylen is the one that is struggling the most with the tempo at times in this group, but then we've even on this lap seen her suddenly leading on the downhill section. And it'd be also very interesting if she does drop back, if this lead group on the final lap will try and just leave her stranded out there on her own a little. Maybe going from teamwork makes the dream work to suddenly me against the world sort of affair on this final lap of the bike at certain points.
Well, I did remember watching Beth Potter race this race a few years ago, obviously before she became world champion last year. And it was a big group together, and her and Kate Woff broke off the front on their own on the hills and the bike. So it is possible. We have seen athletes do it towards the back few laps.
If you see somebody as well, and you have seen somebody over the last 5 laps looking like they have a potential to be dropped off, rather go into transition as a 4 than a 5 if possible, reduce the numbers slightly.
And Vermeylen's a strong runner as well. They might want to lose her. Oh, the gap's definitely gone out because last time they were crossing as the athletes came out of that transition section. So a few more seconds added on. Great for this front 5. They'll be really happy with that. But for that other group, I'm sensing there'll be some frustrated athletes in there. Frustrated that they've been the ones doing the work, that there hasn't been a really good group effort in there, especially if they run faster and when you actually get onto the 10K run.
As soon as we get to the first uphill section, Vermeylen, who was leading them, suddenly falls back into that 4th position once again, and even further back perhaps into 5th. And this is where she does start to lose out to perhaps some of the stronger cyclists that we've seen today in terms of Eva Goodison and co. I'd say Goodison and Jeffcoat are the two that look like they've really pushed the pace when they've wanted to. Rainsley as well, you could probably add into that, at least on the uphill sections. There's still a long way to go as well.
Yeah, and for Goodison, it's like an emerging new Kiwi athlete on the circuit as well. For the last 2 years, it's been Ainsley Thorpe and Nicole van der Kay, and it's been the two of them pretty much in every relay, or they're the ones that went to the Olympics. So exciting to see some of their new talent kind of coming through and showing themselves at the World Cup level.
As we touched on earlier, the level of inexperience that Goodison has compared to, well, everybody else pretty much in this group. I think the closest to her in terms of experience is Sian Rainsley with 55 starts on the World Triathlon stage. His confirmation at the time has gone out to 1:43 at the last timing check going through the end of lap 5. And this seems to be, this is the section where they add the most time to their advantage, those leading 5. So this is where there's the most likely potential to push it up to around about 2 minutes, unless again the likes of Konig and co can force and find a reaction to close it down. Again, Konig and the Belgian as well.
Definitely heard a coach or someone shouting there. So there is that information, there's that feedback there on course, which will be really helpful for that group. Helpful or demoralising?
I was going to say, it's helpful until you turn the corner and realise that those leading 5 are well on their way up the hill. You still can't see that chase group in the background, which just highlights how much that gap has gone out from the start of the first and second lap really on the bike. Rotation up front as Ackland once again moves into the top spot, followed by her fellow countrywoman.
And this is the interesting lap because they want to keep the pressure on and keep it going. I think they'll feel comfortable. The 1:43 is an excellent gap and they've worked really hard for that. So let's just keep the pressure on. But there is also that switch in mentality. This is the lap, like, right, okay, the 10K is coming up. We just saw Sian Rainsley take that gel on. It's like, right, just make sure you've got everything ready now, that you're almost like that, your headspace shifts towards the run at this point. But at the same time, they can't ease off because this group won't be easing off.
The time, I guess, when would that be to really start focusing about the run? I mean, would you just suggest that last downhill section before they get into the flatter part? Or?
I say literally just when you're taking your shoes off, probably. It's right to the end. I think there's a part of your brain that will go to it. And in terms of just preparing, is like just drink your last lap, make sure you kind of got everything ready. If there's a gel, just do that in that last lap. But again, I think if it's a bigger group, then maybe you might get that thought. But also then you can't switch off. If someone in the middle of that group kind of switches off and starts thinking about how they're going to pace the first lap of the run, then that's when accidents are going to happen. So really keeping that awareness. And if athletes have had a really hard ride, that's when it can get a little bit trickier in the group. And that's when kind of crashes can happen. But so far, everyone's, it all looks like it's been pretty smooth. We saw Sarah Weromanso pull out, but we think that might have been a bike issue earlier on.
Well, again, having to work hard to get onto the back of the remaining 4 out at the front. It's the American that's taking them through at the moment, Rappaport. Goodison now leads them into the last time they'll take this turn. About 1:16.45. Vermeylen again, just off the rear and working hard out of the seat.
Yeah, it's just been that last couple of laps, isn't it? The gap's opened up just a little bit too much. Even the first lap, she just lost a little bit of ground on the steep sections, but feels like it's opened up a bit more. But again, she's able to claw her way back onto that group.
Seen her hydrating a lot, particularly on this section, actually, in the last 2 laps.
It will be getting warmer at this point as well. Alissa Konig there at the front, trying to keep the pace on just up the hill. Some athletes at the back really struggling there. Last stretch now down for these athletes towards the get to transition.
Yeah, they'll be very happy indeed to see the back of this hill.
And I think these 5 are actually in the toughest position because they have to set the pace on the run. They have to go out. And it's the ones behind that almost is a bit easier because you're just going as hard as you can. You've got a big gap to close down. You're just managing that effort level. But basically, you do have to pace it, but you know you've got to get out hard to even have any chance. Whereas the front 5, you're starting with the heavy legs. They've had 40 kilometres now of working in a team that's through and off together. Their legs are going to be tired. So how do they pace the run? So I do feel the pressure's very much on the front. It's probably easier to be chasing than be the chased.
Yeah, you can go more gung-ho. It's podium or nothing sort of thing if you're in that chasing group, can't you? Whereas, yeah, out of the front, it's knowing your own body and how you feel in your own moment almost more than anything else. I think that gap's going to be about 1:50 at this turn. 16:45 roughly. It's about 1:18.35 that the chase group come through. So it's going to be around about 2 minutes. You'd imagine that these leaders are going to have over everybody else in the field. Not an impossible task, but an improbable one. It's all dependent on how these ladies can do. What is the state of Vermeylen, considering she's been dropping off the back of this bike every so often? What's the state of Rappaport, considering she's still on the comeback trail, but knows these streets so well here in Tongyeong? What is the experience of Eva Goodison and being able to test her nerve and that mettle up at the front? The New Zealand athlete, Sian Rainsley as well, somebody who was won in Hong Kong earlier this year on the World Cup stage in the first race of this year, but is still relatively new to that winning feeling on the World Cup stage. The unknowns are out there in that group of 5 at the front. The only thing that is known is that these ladies want to, in the chasing group, just eat into the road as quickly as possible, particularly when they get out on that 10K run.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on the splits and what they're doing, where they're coming down, who are the faster runners in the field. Alissa Konig has turned herself inside out on this bike course. I think nearly every shot we've seen, it's been her, or Gina Sereno, I think she's been up there a lot as well. Alissa Konig we've seen too, Mice from Belgium. There's been
about 4 or 5 that have really done the hard graft,
but Konig, I feel like she's been at the front almost every time.
Not seen her away from the top 3 in that group, that's for sure.
That might be detrimental to her later on in the run, where we've had some of those athletes. We've got Sandra Dode in there, and she's such a good runner. She won the European Super Sprint Championships earlier this year. She's lightning quick.
She's just been biding her time back in that group.
Yeah, she has, yeah. And she's got a lot of experience. She's won a lot of World Cups. When it comes down to a run, she's always going to be there. And it was Matt McElroy who won on this course a couple of years ago, and he said that this is a runner's course. He always perceived this race, although it's quite a hilly bike and a hard bike, it's a runner's course. So it's whether these women that are coming in with that almost a couple of minutes down, whether they can use that run strength to get back to the front.
These ladies are getting a quick chance to look across and see the flags around transition just fluttering in the wind. There's still a little bit more to go out here on the bike as they come round the front and take the hairpin turn. We'll bring them back in towards transition. Vermeylen again just off the back of this group slightly. She has been throughout. This is when thoughts will start turning really to the run now, and Well, these athletes start getting their feet out of the pedals, start loosening some of the straps, start preparing for transition and the dismount as quickly, as smoothly as possible. So Rappaport struggled a little bit in transition out of the swim and then going out onto the bike. She'll be hoping for a cleaner run through T2. Those with the energy levels are suddenly making a quick burst for the last part of this final lap. Vermeylen doing her best to hang on. We've lost another just towards the rear of this group, however.
That's Rappaport who's at the back of the
Ladies
group.
and gentlemen, by the winning athlete.
And it is just giving away seconds at this point. It just means you've got to cover that first 400 metres, that kilometre, just a little bit quicker than your other competitors. And that's easily avoided, that one, just coming into transition just a couple of seconds ahead. The athletes will really be feeling this after a 40-kilometre hard ride. And Sian Rainsley struggling a little bit there to get that bike in the rack.
Just some composure needed. Great from Vermeylen, just getting out on the run as quickly as possible. The Belgians made up those few seconds that she may have lost slightly on the back end of that bike and has gone straight out into first place. Very well done from her through T2.
Rainsley looks good running out. Just see her there quickly passing second and third, just making her way up to Vermeylen.
Rappaport back again. Best transition for her, it seems.
It's a nice gap though, isn't it? You can see the cyclists going the other way. And that must be hard for those cyclists, seeing the athletes running out of transition, and you know you've still got to go down, get round that roundabout and then back in.
And then go through the stationary for a few seconds and
Yeah.
getting off the bike, getting the shoes on.
And for Vermeylen, she's been so close in a couple of World Cups to that winning position. She's done a fantastic shot here. She's in the best position she's been in, hasn't it? To try and take her first ever World Cup win.
Here comes Summer Rappaport, though, right on her coattails. And Rappaport is not going to let the Belgian just go off into the distance. And instead, she might be looking to push the pace early, the American.
I mean, what a story if Summer Rappaport wins this race.
I mean, it's a great test as well to see exactly how much fitness she has been able to regain over the last few months and get herself back into peak conditioning. And if she does have it in her to lead from the front from pretty much the word go on this run, 4 laps, remember, to make up the 10 kilometres on a winding run course that will weave its way around the front before taking in the uphill towards the International Music Foundation building, and then coming snaking back down the hill back towards the transition area where eventually the blue carpet will wait for one of these athletes. And there is a definitive 3 up at the front that are starting to make the early headway. Rappaport leading the Belgian in first and second, and then Rainsley, the British athlete, in third.
And it's like you said earlier, that all that experience that Rappaport has, she's been in this scenario before where she's been at the front of a World Cup, kind of pushing the pace. She's been in this scenario where she's doing it over a World Champ Series. Her last World Cup win was back in 2019, but she has been on a World Cup podium since then, and obviously several World Championship Series podiums too. But if you look at it back at her last few results, you know, 37th at the final, 38th at Hamburg, we haven't seen her in this shape, in this kind of comeback shape for a little while. I mean, even like 49th in Yokohama, and last year was 2023 was such a good season. It was just that crash at the end that kind of derailed everything for her.
Scuppered everything, didn't it? And sent plans for 2024 slightly down the drain a little. Rappaport with a look over her shoulder just to see which of the 2 athletes that is with her is hanging tightest.
And we're just seeing the timing splits coming in for those athletes heading out of transition now. So Alissa Konig, Ainsley Thorpe, they're over 2 minutes down.
Yeah, 2:05 for the chase group, the first of the chase group through transition. It's a big ask, as Vermeylen now is just having a chance to almost go stride for stride and right alongside the American. These 3, though, in a relatively comfortable pace. A couple of puffs from Vermeylen there, as Rappaport, on the other hand, it's always interesting with the shades because you cannot really tell the true emotion with the big glasses on of these ladies to obviously block out the sun, maybe hide some emotion as well out there.
Yeah, good. You would have a good game face. It's hard though when you're running because you can hear the breathing of other people, or you can hear their feet, you can hear it change, and But some athletes you're running with, they sound like they're breathing really heavy and they're not, but they always sound like that. So everyone is different. And if you've raced with someone a lot, you do get to know kind of, I suppose, their quirks of how they feel, and you get to sense when that changes.
Yeah, and some of them you don't have a poker face at all. You can see the grimacing, but it's a grimacing that keeps a consistent heavy pace going for the majority of the run and can push them through. Everybody has their own quirks and tweaks out there on the run course, as these ladies in just a few seconds time will start to make the tough climb up the hill.
I always think this is such a nice run course. It's quite twisty and technical, like you said, but it's quite different. Like running on the little path and kind of the twists and turns and the hills, it does break it up. It's not a monotonous kind of run. So although it is a challenging one, especially with that hill towards the end of the lap.
When the wind's up as well, you're not exactly sheltered from it out there on the waterfront. It can be beating right into you coming off the waves, as Rappaport again just has a little surge for Vermeylen. Every so often you think she's grimacing or struggling, and she has a quick look around to see where the British athlete is behind her.
Rappaport at this point quite happy to do the front running as well. I always think this is a fascinating part of this run course, because even on the first lap we're going to see who's good at running uphill and who's good at running it downhill, and then it does change throughout the race as well when that tiredness kicks in and the heavy legs. Sian Rainsley just pushed up there next to Rappaport or past Vermeylen.
Yeah, it's very much a wheat and the chaff separating point, isn't it, the uphill, where those that have still got that grind in them can really push and pick off some of the weaker strugglers later on in this run. As I say, it's only a short burst up the hill, but it's just so steep, and this inside line on that turn as well does nothing to help in terms of slowing you down and grinding the legs down to not quite a halt for sure, but certainly eking away at the energy reserves time and time again when you take it. Rappaport, Rainsley, Vermeylen. Gudison next. The athlete from New Zealand, Emma Jeffcoat's been left well away, as you see her just making it up the last section of the hill as the leading three start to make their way down, and Vermeylen again just dropping off. Look, it's the uphill sections that we saw her on the bike that she was struggling with. Can she make up the same ground as she did on the bike on the downhill sections here on the run?
And running downhill is hard as well. We have athletes that are so good at it and athletes which really struggle. Vermeylen just coming back past there. She really is enjoying that downhill run. Well, maybe not enjoying, but definitely getting benefit from it.
Almost with the arms the way they go. Makes it look like she's just letting the whole body go and letting gravity do the work as the chasers are starting to make their way up the hill for the first time. Be interesting to see at the end of this lap just where that gap stands between those that are leading in terms of the chasing group and those that are falling behind in terms of Jeffcoat and Gudison.
I made a note of where they were. Konig 2:05 down, Sereno 2:12, Dode 2:13. So they all came out pretty close together. But yeah, we have to look at where they are, how much time they're pulling back, and whether these athletes in the front are under threat from those chasers.
Does Rappaport have those reserves, have that energy, that fitness to be able to last 10 kilometres with the two that are with her? She's confident leading it right now, though. The other two that have had their differing pushes on the uphill and downhill section on this run, whereas Rappaport has just looked very steady throughout it. Vermeylen, of course, knows that it's important to leave something in the tank if needed for that sprint finish. Can't afford to sacrifice too much, though, and fall back either. Desperate for that first World Cup win, the Belgian.
And she has got a good sprint finish, Vermeylen. I mean, but Summer Rappaport knows how to win races. She's won so many races in her career, multiple World Cups, World Champ Series, Podium, so she knows how to win. She'll know what she's going to do. She'll make a decision when she's going to push. And at the moment, she looks pretty comfortable, doesn't she? She's really smooth, she's relaxed, she's happy to be at the front, which I think is a really good sign of showing her confidence and, you know, how she's actually feeling.
A slight intimidation factor as well. If you're chasing, and you see Summer Rappaport looking as good as she does right now in the lead, and you suddenly think in the back of your head, oh, she might be back here.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign for any of us.
Good race until now.
For the moment, the duo that are with her are sticking with her. Vermeylen just coming out of the slipstream slightly. Goodison coming through as well around the carpeted section.
See how much time Goodison's lost over this first lap.
Rappaport through in 1 hour 31 minutes and 23 seconds after the first lap of the run. Goodison leading Emma Jeffcoat at this point. Decent advantage as 28 and 49 seconds. Goodison back on the leader and Jeffcoat following on, almost a minute down now, the Australian.
And that's what can be done in one lap, isn't it? So you think the chasers behind are moving really well. I mean, these front three do look like they're going really well. So again, Rappaport's at the front. She almost looks better this lap, doesn't she? Shaking off the legs in that first lap after that hard bike ride and looks very comfortable.
Takes a bit of time, doesn't it, just to get into your stride after having no impact at all on the bike but still working hard, and get those jelly legs suddenly working nice and solidly for the run.
Yeah, you tend to find your stride over that second lap. Well, that's why some athletes will definitely prefer an Olympic distance as well. They've got that bit longer to find the rhythm.
And then use it when they have it.
Yeah.
Still waiting to see the next group of chasers coming through in terms of how the gap is being made up between them and particularly Summer Rappaport, but certainly the likes of Eva Goodison and Emma Jeffcoat right now. These three haven't really changed much in the last few moments. Sandra Dode in 6th already, 1:53 off the leader, so she has eaten some time into the gap, but she's still about a minute off Emma Jeffcoat right now. Gina Sereno as well, the American, and Alissa Konig are the three that are hot on the heels, all 1:53 off the leader and all trying to close that gap as much as possible. Alissa Konig down in 11th, still 2:05, so the gap hasn't changed between her and Rappaport since getting off the bike, which is no real surprise really if Alissa Konig was working so hard at the front of that bike group, and maybe she's used a little bit too much energy on the bike that the likes of Sandra Dode are able to capitalise on right now.
Yeah, Dode's pulled back 20 seconds on that lap. She wasn't one of the fastest out of transition, so it's been a really fast first lap for her. But like I say, like we mentioned earlier, she's on the chase. She's really got to put everything into this. And if Vermeylen and Rainsley and Rappaport continue the way they are, they're absolutely fine. I mean, can Dode keep pulling back 20 seconds a lap? That we'll see, but that's going to be really tricky.
Yeah, it's just the question marks that we've touched on throughout this race of out at the front of how many of that leading group are able to keep up this sort of pace and this sort of tempo and this sort of advantage when there are so many strong runners in that group behind. And there are question marks over the likes of Rappaport's fitness still. Vermeylen, obviously, we don't have as many question marks over. It's been a long 2024 for her, though, just in case there are maybe a bit of strain late on in the calendar year. Rainsley as well, not exactly tried and tested all the time in these World Cup victories, although that experience from Hong Kong will pay dividends today in terms of leading out of the front and being in this front three. Have they all got the reserves after working hard on the bike, though, to be able to maintain that distance, or has sitting in and almost watching and waiting for the likes of Dode and some of the others, is that going to pay off in the latter part of this run? It'd be a Herculean effort for her to get up with these three right now, because Rappaport has no interest in slowing down or changing the pace at all.
Well, you mentioned Rainsley there. She started that year with the Hong Kong World Cup. It feels like a long time ago now, right back at the start of the season, and had a decent year since. You know, regular top 10 in World Cup, a couple of 20ths in World Champ Series. I know she wasn't happy with the 20th in Weihai. She really struggled on the bike there and just felt had been sick the week leading in, just felt under pressure. So imagine if she got a podium at the back end of the year. What a season to start with a win and manage to get on the podium or a win at the back end of the year.
Does well in the sprint distances, not today, unfortunately. Otherwise, this would be over this run after the end of this lap. But you look at the 5th place in Tisjavaros as well for Rainsley this year, and it just shows you can perform at this level, and if she can keep this level of consistency, it's only going to build more and more confidence and prowess to her name. The World Cup calendar for next year, the 2025 calendar, has been released by World Triathlon. There's a fair few stops for us throughout next year. World Cup's bouncing all over the globe. Tongyeong will be there, and Rappaport will be hoping to maybe come back next year as a defending champion.
Well, it's nice when the races are on consistently, because the athletes get used to coming, and I think it's nice when you come back to a race and you think, oh, you know where the pool is to go train, you know where you're going to go and eat. It's just, it feels like a more comfortable environment. I think the athletes do race better, because this is a tricky one with time zone change for some of the athletes.
Didn't realise we were meant to be training in the pool. Rather enjoy it for other reasons.
No training pre-race. They will do obviously the swim familiarizations in the water. Some athletes don't always want to get in and will just leave it till race day. But yeah, one of the things of being a triathlete, you have a lot of luggage. You always have to take a bike somewhere. Then you get somewhere, you have to find the pool. You have to find somewhere to ride your bike. Logistically, being a triathlete is quite tough.
A lot of airfares for extra baggage as well, I imagine.
It's a bit easier for runners, just the shoes and you're off.
Vermeylen, by the way, has been able to stay out in front with Rainsley right alongside her. Rainsley's only just gone past the Belgian, but it's a far better uphill section from Vermeylen, who continues to just look at that watch on her left wrist, and whatever she's getting in terms of times or heart rate or what, it's obviously something she's looking to keep an eye on. Rappaport, in the meantime, is the thing she needs to keep an eye on, because the American is still leading this trio through.
Yeah, with the watch, it could be pacing. Like, what's the speed? Or as it was just at the top of the hill, it could be heart rate, thinking, right, okay, my heart rate's gone up that high, I need to bring it back under. If I know I reached that limit so many times. It depends how scientific athletes' training is. Some are going to be really aware of the numbers, and like that heart rate means a certain amount and I can't go too deep. Some athletes prefer to do it a little bit more by feel, especially in a race. So it really depends on what kind of athlete you are.
Vermeylen again just had another look at it on the way down the hill. She's not been able to claw back any of the gap on the leader or that lady in second as well. Rainsley has Hedgeland there just coming along the front, down at the waterfront, way behind these three right now.
Okay, so the gap was 1:53 last time they came through. So that's what we're looking at again. Goodison was about 30 seconds down, and Jeffcoat a further 20 behind that.
Rainsley right on the shoulder of Rappaport. Vermeylen getting herself back into almost touching distance once again. See more of the chasers coming round. Sakai, the Japanese athlete, Thorpe as well. Going to be their day up towards the podium unless one of these three has absolute disaster, but there may be a challenge from further back potentially later on in this race. Taking on some more energy down there.
The way those front three are running at the moment, I don't think there's any risk from behind, but things can change.
Well, just wondering, Vermeylen looks like she's struggling more on this lap than the previous ones. There's a continual look at that watch as well. That may be all part of the plan, but there's also the idea that some athletes, when they start getting distracted at looking at things like watches and rather than focusing on the race out in front of them, we'll have to find out from Vermeylen at the end if that is the case or if that is all part of the plan that she's had coming into today. But she's back in third right now and has looked, at least in the body language, like she's struggling more than these front two, because Rainsley in particular as well just doesn't seem to have changed too much in terms of her stride and fairly confident look out there. Of course, we could be hyperbolic and reading far too much into body language out there on the run, as Vermeylen once again looking to try and get herself just out and away from these two, as she did on the last lap, and taking very much an inside line just on this left-hand turn, coming out onto the third lap of 4.
And it is running style as well, isn't it? Some athletes are naturally going to look more relaxed and maybe better form, but other athletes, it might not look as pretty, but it is as effective. It's just the way, you know, that might just be the way she runs and when she's under pressure. So, yeah, it's hard to read into what's happening. We did notice her dropping off a little bit on the bike. It's come under a little bit of pressure on the hill, but we do also know that if she can hang in there to the end, she's got a great finish. I mean, Summer Rapport, I think she won that World Champs Series back in 2015. It was a sprint distance race, and yeah, she had an incredible finish there to take that win.
It's her that still is out in front, very much in charge of this trio. It's all been run at Rappaport's pace in Rappaport's race.
And she's been around for such a long time now. It's hard to think she got started with the American collegiate system. She was a great swimmer. She got the USAT, USA Triathlon, their talent identification scheme was like, oh, well, you're a good swimmer, you're a good runner in both of these. It's like, how do you fancy doing triathlon? They've had so many good athletes that have gone to world level come from that program, including Gwen Jorgensen. So, yeah, Summer Rappaport is a product of that program, still going, obviously, years later and still performing really well.
Just testament to the amount of funding that goes into US sport at pretty much every single level. And you look at the athletes that come through their collegiate system in pretty much any big school across the US and the facilities available to them. It's not just about the gyms and the running tracks and the pools and everything else, but it's even the coaching staff, the nutritionists, dietitians, counsellors they have. I mean, it is all mental, physical focus all rolled into one, and it's almost 24/7. It's the gap between third and fourth is 1:05. Goodison and Dode are on the charge right now. Dode is 1:31, looking to eat into the New Zealander, who continues to fall back into the French woman's clutches. So it's another 20 seconds or so from Dode that's come down.
Jeff Coates gone down as well, hasn't she? Jeff Coates kind of gone there.
She is falling by the wayside and coming out the other end right now. I mean, she's not even in the top 16, unfortunately, the Australian.
God, Dode again, another 20 seconds, just over 20 seconds on that lap. So if they stay at the current rate, she's of another 40 seconds or so, she's not going to catch, but she's getting close.
Yeah, we'll still maybe leave her about 50 seconds or so behind the leaders if it stays at that pace. I mean, it's asking so much for her to get back into it. She's hoping for something to happen up at the front to maybe give herself a chance. She's been excellent, though, in eating up the ground on Eva Goodison, who, as I say, is only about 20 seconds down the road or so, and that gap is slowly but surely getting smaller and smaller.
For Eva Goodison, though, still in fourth position. If she manages to hang on to that top 10, that's a great finish for her. We've got Alissa Konig currently in 6th. Sereno is in 7th. Costanza Arpanelli is in 8th. Alissa Konig is in 9th. And Marta Pintonel's in 10th. So that's the way they're currently sitting.
Vermeylen going into second just for a moment off the shoulder of Rainsley and then slotting back in once again. Be so interesting if she is just playing a waiting game, hoping to be in contact with Rappaport right before the end.
These three women have been locked together since the start of the race, isn't it? Right there from the swim, all of that bike together. They've really been about this distance from each other.
Well, if this is the plotting cabal that you mentioned in terms of working out how this race is going to go, they're the last three standing from that group that have decided that they're going to try and make Tongyeong a race that they're in control of. They are very much almost line in line, toe to toe, getting to know each other's running styles rather well. That uphill section is coming in just a few moments' time. Be interesting to see again if or how much the Belgian drops away from these two, and if they do look to find any separation from her. Ireland every single time has been able to just come back, though, and find herself right next to these ladies once again.
Yeah, and if you're not confident on the hill, then you're going to want to break away before the hill. So this could be the time after the hill, or maybe now, where we might see a move from one of these athletes. This might be a time to really make a push and try and establish it. Again, I don't want this to come down to a sprint, so I'm going to have to do something, either this hill or that, or the next kind of level on the flat. There's almost two sections to this run lap: the flatter bit or the hill. Where are you going to make the difference, and where are you going to go for it?
Ireland doing better at the moment to stick with them, and she's actually making a push just on the outside, and well, she's the one that's making her charge on this uphill section. Rappaport looking to retaliate as Vermeylen goes into the lead for the first time. I have to say, considering what's come before, I wasn't expecting it to be the Belgian that was leading them up at the top of the hill, as Rainsley now is just suddenly starting to fall back behind these two, as it's clear that the Belgian has made a slightly stronger push, and Rappaport has the ability to at least retaliate with her.
Rainsley's come under pressure there. She's going to have to try and recover on the downhill. You're going to try and use this downhill to run away back onto the back of those two athletes.
Vermeylen's been good on the downhill as well, as Rappaport looks to go just ahead of the Belgian once again. Won't be too bad for her if she can slot in behind her. Use her as body to draft off Vermeylen. It's Rappaport trying to extend it out a bit more, but the Belgian going with her. I wonder if this is just a test as well for the final lap to see how others react.
Yeah, a little bit of a test, see what's going on. But there, they've managed to drop Rainsley there. That was Vermeylen that did that, wasn't it? She did really increase the tempo up the hill.
She's doing it on the downhill section as well. Her and Rappaport exchanging the lead a couple of times just in the last few hundred metres or so.
And just going in the other direction, I did see Sandra Dode halfway up that hill. So they are getting that visual as well, that the athletes are coming from behind. That we can't just do cat and mouse and look at each other. We need to keep pushing. So if we ease off too much, and although they do have a good cushion, it's really hard to rationalise that when you're running hard and you're on your limit. You can't be thinking, oh, this many seconds and that many seconds and this point and that point. It's like, no, I need to make sure this gap is big enough.
Vermeylen's making an extra push as well.
She said she was going to race for the win today. She said she always is going to race for the win. She's not racing for a podium. She wants to be on top.
Rappaport needing to react and push hard. And suddenly, just like that, Rainsley's been dropped out of the equation for the moment. Never say never, but the British athlete is finding it hard to hang tough with the leading two.
And for the first time, I think Summer Rappaport looks under pressure, doesn't she? She's been in the front. She looks super controlled and calm. Just a little bit under pressure, a bit more rocking in that upper body. The facial expression has changed. Vermeylen has really picked up the pace, and she's laying down the pressure.
Every so often, you can almost see the kick of an extra gear with a couple of strides from Rappaport behind, as Vermeylen just tries to continue to open up a little bit more space.
And they've put a big gap into Rainsley really quickly. We see what damage that hill does. So if you're hitting that hill with tired legs and one of the other athletes is fresher and can push on, I think that's where Dode is probably making up some time as well. I mean, she was a minute 30 behind, so it's going to be really hard for her to get anywhere near these three at the front.
Now it's a little more open from Rappaport, taking on a little bit extra oxygen, perhaps breathing a little deeper than she has done as they come to start the final lap of this run. And for the first time since the very early few metres of this run, it's the Belgian Vermeylen that leads them through. Rainsley still staying in a podium position, but the front two are pulling away right now at the front of the pack.
And Vermeylen again, looks like she just got another surge, another push.
Now the question is, how early is too early from Vermeylen? A second ahead of Rappaport at the start of this lap. That's gone out to maybe a second and a half, maybe 2 seconds, and it looks like it's growing a little bit more. Rainsley 8 seconds behind the leader. And fading into the distance, the Belgian is putting on a really impressive push just at the end of this third lap and the start of the fourth. Now it's about maintaining it and holding on to this advantage and being able to continue that push. Dode as well looking to come through to start the final lap as the French woman looks like, I think she's got ahead of Eva Goodison at this point.
Yeah, she's ahead of Goodison. She's moved away into 4th position.
Is there enough time to make up the time on Sian Rainsley? Tougher out there on your own when you're struggling.
Yeah, she's
Rainsley being dropped off.
gone past Goodison. I think that might be Leah Konig now in 5th position. Goodison might have slipped down to 6th. So Dode is a minute 29. So she's only pulled back 2 seconds on that lap. Like we said, can she keep doing 20 seconds a lap? And she can't. It's been too much. She's settled now into the same pace Vermeylen's push on that last lap will have extended these two away from her again.
And it's extending Vermeylen away from Rappaport, who is becoming a little bit of a distant memory around the harbour front here.
And it's really important on this course not to give up, because if the athlete in front of you blows up on that hill, they can lose so much time. So even though that gap has gone out, Rappaport has to keep her there, has to keep her as close as possible, because if Vermeylen doesn't do well on the hill, Rappaport could bring her back.
Yeah, it's all about working out whether she's gone too early or not, but she's got now a very healthy advantage. Leah Konix is up in 5th, Eva Goodison in 6th, Gina Sereno, the American, in 7th as it stands right now. They're all around about 2 minutes back, though, from the leader. A look over the shoulder, a look across the harbour wall to see where Rappaport is. Rappaport is not close at this point. Close enough in case there are any problems, but Vermeylen just needs to keep it neat and tidy and keep this pace if it's possible. She might not need the sprint finish in the end. She might have done all that needs to be done at the start of this 4th lap.
I think she's got a good gap now. It must be about 10 seconds. So she's done one part of the twisty, turny side of the course, back past transition, a little bit more of the coastal path, and then up the hill. It's not far away from Vermeylen. And at this point, you can't think too far ahead. You can't think, oh my God, I'm going to win my first full curve. I'm in the best position. You've just got to keep your head, stay focused on what you're doing. You don't actually, she won't even believe it till she gets onto that blue carpet at the end, but she's got to keep pushing at this point.
Even on these small turns, you just see her left boot going over the edge of the steps,
Yeah.
and you think, don't misjudge that, whatever you do. Don't catch the side of a step and have some sort of error at this point. It is not far away, that first World Cup win for Vermeylen.
They're so close to the edge, aren't they? Because they're just taking the best line. They're really pushing it. But yeah, when you're getting tired, you don't want to make any mistakes at this point.
I think it's over 10 seconds, the gap that she's got at this point. But that hill looms large just in front of her, just over to her right. Navigating that, and then the downhill section. Then it's all flat for home. Rappaport and Rainsley bringing up the rear right now. Is Rainsley getting back on Rappaport slightly? Is that gap just closing down a little?
So we can see Vermeylen breathing. She looks under pressure, but I think we've been thinking that all day when she's been kind of yo-yoing off the back of the pack at the steeper sections and then struggling to get on, almost getting dropped on the run at the start. She really has been the master of the comeback today.
Taking every single corner as tightly as possible, looking to go the shortest route around this course. A look over the shoulder as she tackles the hill for the last time.
She has a good cushion at this point.
Breathing heavy though, look at the face. Really puffing out those cheeks on this hill. She knows that this is where she started to make her push on the last lap. It has been a lap of full push from Vermeylen up to this point. And there's only around about a third of it remaining or so for her to make that push. It looks like such hard work out there right now for her as she takes the inside line, but the steepest line, and looks to go hard on the flat. It looks so tough from her right now.
Oh, she's doing everything possible to get at that hill, isn't she? She's really suffering up there.
Almost looks like she's losing her balance as she makes her way finally to the flat section and starts to come down to the tight turn. And all routes from this point lead towards home. You can hear how heavily she's breathing.
That gap will be good. She'll see that gap, think, right, I've got a gap, because Rappaport looks like she's moving better at this point. Vermeylen really pushed it there. She turned herself inside out to get at that hill. Rappaport can't give up, especially if you heard Vermeylen breathing there.
You certainly will have heard it if you're Summer Rappaport as Vermeylen makes her way down the hill. She knows it's all in her own hands, in her own feet, in her own legs right now. The dream she's been chasing for this year to find that gold on the World Cup stage. Tantalizingly close on so many occasions. And is she leaving it all out there to finish off 2024 for herself? Rappaport still not visible at the bottom of the hill. And that gap, seeing that gap at that turn will have brought Vermeylen, I'm sure, just a boost of confidence and the energy of knowing that the surge she's made has perhaps all been worth it. Ignoring the water for the moment. It's not about the hydration right now. It's about heading for home as quickly as possible.
Oh, and she looks good now. She really did suffer on the hill, but I think she didn't lose any time there, although it looked like she might have done. She really didn't.
She was just pushing herself through those last really tough yards of that hill climb. A check over the shoulder once again to see that the gap, I think, has gone out even further from the American, who looks good in second right now. But it's only going to be second, and she certainly has played second to Vermeylen on this run, on the final stages of this run. And if you think she's a bubbly personality in her post-race interviews when she's just making the podium, look at the smile suddenly starting to come out on her face as she's starting to receive some applause from some of the marshals and the volunteers down there. She knows it's just a few seconds away. And I'm sure it doesn't feel like hard work right now. Brilliance from the Belgian right until the end. This is what she's been dreaming of. Jolien Vermeylen taking in every single hand, every single moment of this victory. A World Cup gold is finally hers. And look what it means to her. A sensational race that has seen her right at the front from the word go. And perhaps it can only be topped by one of the comebacks of 2024. Not quite completed, not quite a third victory in Tongyeong for Summer Rappaport, but a fantastic second place finish that shows that she is getting back to her best. And the podium is wrapped up by Sian Rainsley, who comes in third, and three women that made it their own on the run right at the end. But the cream rose to the top, and Jolien Vermeylen gets that first World Cup gold of her career. I think it's fair to say, of all the storylines, we've seen perhaps two of the neutrals' favourites come to fruition on the run.
Oh, amazing to see Vermeylen get that gold after seeing her come so close a few times. And so you could see the emotion on Summer Rappaport's face as she came down the blue carpet then, what it means to be back racing and have a successful result. I love that camaraderie between those three athletes as well. They really worked for that today. That group effort, that team effort, working together to get that really large gap. And that's done it for them because there are faster runners behind. So they really owe that podium to each other.
Yeah, that's superb, the run from Saja Dode, but it was just too much in the end after the front five on the bike gave themselves enough of an advantage to get the job done. And in the end, the French woman finishing probably about 90 seconds behind the leaders, followed by Alissa Konig to make out the top five as French triathlon continues to go from strength to strength to strength, and two athletes in the top five shows the depth that they have in their team across the World Triathlon remit. Gina Sereno able to take sixth as unfortunately Eva Goodison just continuing to fall back into the clutches of others as Marta Pintinel able to come across to take a top 10 spot, as does the Italian Costanza Arpinelli.
And there's Konig, isn't it, coming over?
Yeah, Alissa Konig. The work she did on the bike will have been so important for the likes of Sandra Dode and Alissa Konig in particular. It won't have done her much good in comparison.
Beatrice Malozzi as well, she's a former junior world champion. And did Eva Goodison get inside the top 10? Or
Yeah, Eva Goodison just coming in 8th place. I think that's going to be for her. Oh, no. She has missed out on the top 10. Excuse me, the timing chart's just updating. She's going to end up finishing just outside the top 10. So hopefully in a moment we'll be able to hear from Jolien Vermeylen down there on the blue carpet. It's Vermeylen, Rappaport, Rainsley, Dode, Konig, Sereno, Pintanel, Arpinelli, Konig, Malozzi, excuse me, and making up the top 10, Goodison finishing in 11th in the end, the athlete from New Zealand, who was one of those leading 5, along with Jeffco, who's just been unable to hold on and make it a top 10 finish in the end. Hai Rim Jong coming through as the first Korean athlete to finish here in a top 20 position. I think it's a top 15 for her, in fact. Rim Jong able to come in 14th. Gaeon Park 15th, so 2 of the Koreans finishing in the top 15, which will be excellent for the local athletes for sure.
And excellent results for them as well, because they were ranked way further down on the start there, so really outperforming their number coming into the race today. Tamara Gorman with a 13th as well, her comeback after
Jolien,
some
a fantastic performance there, your first win at the World Cup level. How do you feel?
Happy. Like, how else would I feel? I'm tired, and I'm always very tired after a race, but now I'm so happy. And also I think all the 3 disciplines were good. We had a good swim. We worked so well on the bike, like everyone kept taking turns even when we were tired, so I think we had a pretty big lead. I think it was over 2 minutes. And then, yeah, we could just, well, I won't say we could just run our own pace, but actually Summer did a lot of good pacing work, so credits for that. And we just tried to hang on until in the end I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to make a move. And then I accelerated and she talked to me and I was like, no, this is not fast enough. This is not fast enough. And like, just keep pushing, and that was enough. But happy to answer your question. Yeah, I talked.
Now, before the race, you said that you weren't very optimistic about your run over the 10K and you didn't like running up hills. That seemed to prove otherwise today.
I still don't like running uphill, but yeah, I'm so happy with my 10K. But I think it's very often, like I say, I do kind of a fly and die. Like I go out super fast, and then after 2K, I already feel like, yeah, like this wasn't the best plan of the world, like, you know. And now, like Summer, she did such a good pacing, and I was like, watching my watch, and I was like, okay, this is the pace coach told me I could do. Like, let's keep this. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be too hard. In the end, I could accelerate, so coach was right, as always. Like, yeah.
Now, it's obviously been a very long season, but you've now got 2 World Cup medals in a row, and you're racing in Miyazaki next weekend, so a 3rd World Cup medal, perhaps?
I think that's what you want to hear, isn't it? I can see it at your face. Yeah, let's hope. Like, just as I said, I think it's 2 days ago, just try to do all the disciplines well, try to make good transitions, and then if it comes, then it comes. And even if it's not a medal, if it was a good race, I went all out, then it's nice. Like the other girls, they bring out the best in me, and that's what I love about racing.
Well, congratulations on your first win.
Thank you so much.
Happy. Yeah, one word, happy. I think it's easy to say. So excited there, the victor, Jolien Vermeylen.
Pretty much every time, well, no, every time I've lined up this year before today was just absolutely horrendous. I was really injured at the end of last year. I had a hard time getting healthy again this year at the start of the year. And even after I started training well, I just I couldn't put a race together. And after Torremolinos last week, I told my husband, I think I'm done with triathlon. I wasn't really sure how flying to yet another continent and doing another Olympic distance race was going to go, but I actually feel like I executed a few things well last weekend, even though my final result was absolutely horrendous, and I was kind of able to take the good things and kind of put them together to have a complete race today.
And you've won here in Tongyeong before, so did that give you any confidence knowing you had good memories?
Yeah, it did. So this is actually the first time I haven't won in Tongyeong, but I'm pretty happy with second today.
And you started off really well. You were first out of the water, and then you got into the lead pack, and you all seem to be working great together. How was the start of your race, and generally, how did the lead pack work?
Oh, the lead pack worked super well together, and we kept seeing that we were getting time every lap, and we were encouraging each other and motivating each other. So it was really an ideal scenario for, I think, everyone.
And then obviously at the start of the run, you were setting the pace until Jolien attacked. What was going through your head when she went? Did you have anything left?
Yeah, I tried to respond, but she had another gear once we got back to the flats that I didn't have, and Jolien raced incredibly well and had a great complete race today, and I'm really happy for her.
So you just said that after Torremolinos you thought maybe you were done with triathlon. Has today changed that at all?
I think it might have.
Well, that's great to hear, and congratulations on your silver medal.
Thank you.
You're up. So, a bronze medal for you today. How was your race out there?
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, the swim, we managed to get a bit of a gap out of it, and then we were all working really hard on the bike. It was tough, it was windy, hilly. So yeah, we were only a group of 5. It was like quite constant to be pulling turns, but the gap was going up, and I think it kept us all pretty motivated. And then on the run, I was just trying to hold on for as long as possible. I was like, just keep going. And then I think on the 3rd lap going up the hill, I got dropped. And I was like, oh God, 3K to go to try and hold the gap. But yeah, I'm really happy with that.
You've had a great season so far, but a very long season. You won back in Hong Kong all the way back in March. How has it felt to maintain such high levels throughout the year?
It's been really tiring, but yeah, like you said, it's been a good season. I was out all of last season injured, so I'm just so happy to be back and be back racing. I'm just trying to make the most of it and race as much as possible whilst I'm fit and healthy.
And then what was going through your head when Jolien and then Summer went on the run?
Just try and keep them as close as possible. Just use them to try and keep my own rhythm going. But yeah, when they went, it definitely got tough. I think they put in a surge up the hill, and my legs just felt like jelly. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be walking up it on the last lap. But yeah, just managed to keep it going.
And at the end of last season, you were removed from the British funding system. Now this year, you've really issued quite a riposte to that. So do you feel that you've kind of had a sort of redemption this season?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it was a tough decision to make. It was tough for me, obviously, being out injured and then coming off and losing your funding. But yeah, I've just tried to put that to the back of my mind and just focus on myself and just enjoy being back racing and training and yeah, just making the most of that.
Well, congratulations on your medal today.
Thank you.
3 finishers, 3 beaming smiles on Vermeylen, Rappaport and Rainsley for all different reasons. Wasn't quite the rundown that Sandra Dodo was hoping to be able to provide in the end. Her and Leah Konig's wrapping up the top 5. A handful of names, Emma Jeffco, Ainsley Thorpe, unable to finish today, that will stand out of the DNFs from that run. In terms of an elite women's contest, it was a case, I think, Helen, of the elites came to the forefront at the end, didn't it?
Yeah, there were certain names, weren't there, we were expecting to be there, and some of them missed out on the swim and then just couldn't quite claw it back on the bike. But I think it just shows how effective that group worked together at the front. And I love all 3 athletes there were really brimming with just how fun that race was and how hard it was to work together. But it got them on the podium. So yeah, it was a really exciting race, and I'm really happy for those athletes.
Jolien Vermeylen will be in Miyazaki. The hunger, I'm sure, will still be there, but it will feel even better with a gold medal in her back pocket from today. The podium ceremonies will be coming up later today, as will the men's elite race in a few minutes' time. We will bring you that here on triathlonlive.tv a little later on. That's us done and dusted from the elite women. The elite men around the corner. We'll be back about half an hour's time or so with the start of that race.